Welcome to the SDGs Lead. It's a deep honor today to speak with Gudrun Mosler-Törnström, a trailblazing woman politician from Austria, Salzburg. Today we will in particular discuss the aspect of gender equality and good governance for sustainable development goals. Thank you so much for joining. It's a deep, deep pleasure.
I give it back to you. I'm really delighted to speak with you.
To begin with, it's always important to highlight the experiences and practices of the successful women's politician in order to inspire other women as well as girls who want to start their path in politics. So my first question is, how did your path in politics begin? What was the starting point and what motivated you the most?
Okay, it was a coincidence that I started actively in politics. At that time, when I was asked to start in politics or go into politics, I had my own consulting company in the field of ergonomic workplace design. I'm a studied system analyzer, so that was my job, and I never took in consideration getting actively involved in politics. And the former governor of Salzburg, by the way, also the first woman in this position, commissioned me to prepare a study on successful labor market policy projects in Austria. And after the presentation of this work, it took me a year to do this, she asked me if I would stand for the Social Democrats in the Salzburg State Parliament. I said yes, I was honored. I did not know what would wait for me, and I had a hearing, and for me it was very surprisingly, I was nominated. And the next surprise was I made it at the first run. That was in 1999. And at that time, I was 40 years old and I had a lot of professional and life experience, an asset that has helped me very often in my political career. And through the years, then afterwards, as you know, I gained a lot of experience also in politics on the local, regional, and European level. And that's the way it is. Now I'm here.
It's just amazing how your path is correlated starting from local and regional level and then turning global and having really global impact and inspiration. What were the challenges that you faced and how to overcome them from the perspective of probably giving a kind of advice to girls wanting to enter into politics and wanting to break their ice ceiling in their particular and respective fields?
Well, as I said, it was coincidence that I started in politics, but then I was really taken. And when I started, I was unknown in Salzburg, unknown in the political world as well, because after school, I lived abroad for over 15 years. So nobody knew me really, and there is very often an attitude in politics that lateral entrants don't earn a position very high because they haven't struggled long enough. That was the case as they saw me. And many people had no confidence, and when I said many people, I mean in the political circle, had no confidence in my knowledge and my know-how. So I experienced at the beginning a lot of resistance from some sides, very often men. And I worked very hard, prepared myself well, and tried not to take rejections personally, which, by the way, the first advice is essential of survival in politics. So I also advise all women to occupy topics as economics, technology, research, and development. I did that. And this was also, oh gosh, a woman. Can she do that? And women mostly take on social issues, childcare, education, family policy. Yes, important, very important. But my question is, why are they automatically women's topic? They are all gender's topic. So we need to broaden, as women, our working fields. My advice, even if there is resistance, keep at it, radiate confidence, prepare yourself best, argue, stay positive, talk and don't be silent. Be heard and seen. And being seen, I give you a little private secret now about myself. I still do that today when I'm nervous. I put on a smile and imagine that I turn on the spotlight on my chest and off I go. And you should do that.
Thank you so much for such inspiring words and very practical piece of advice to be followed, because it's very important to know these life hacks and some efficient practices that can be taken as a common practice in different circumstances. And as you've mentioned, involvement of women in STEM industries, technologies, and I would say that were earlier considered in terms of a kind of men's fields. Also, when now women enter these fields, it also opens the path for other women because they show the examples, the role models.
Exactly.
You are just great role model, and I'm really happy to follow you as well. What are the most promising tools for increasing women's participation on all the levels? There are different ones of them, not the least quotas, trainings, and so on. Which of them you consider as most relevant and promising?
It's a huge question. And well, as I think there's no single answer to this. There are many. It depends also whether we are talking about the city or the rural area. It's a big difference. But regardless, if we are in the city or in the rural area, start small and grow big, and create an environment of trust and security. Because when the wind blows strong, and it does often in politics, you should know there is a backing up, there is support. And as women, and ask women to cooperate in projects, if you are able to do so, there should be opportunities in projects to learn on certain topics. Projects in school, in villages, in the local area, in the regional and in the national area. As I said, start small and grow big, because it's so important to have a mentor and to be a mentor, and try to recruit them, the ladies then, to the local or city council. In those environments, one has the opportunity to learn, to argue, to convince, gaining self-confidence, getting ready for the next level. So this is a very, very good practice. And changing role patterns, this is also important. That's what I always do. And not forgetting to fight, and if you have the chance, provide children's care places. Why do I say this? I realize again and again how difficult it is to win women for the local council, for instance, because the answer is, oh, I would love to do it, but I have no time. I cannot do it. I have children, and this is too much work done on certain times. I have no time, because the meeting times are often impossible for women to take part in. And this is a problem men do not have, because home care usually automatically is done by women. So even here we have to have a change, we must change, and we give the opportunity to be part of the game. And there are many things you can do, and you have to start again at grassroots level.
Absolutely. So it's about removing these barriers which automatically exist when it's not about partnership, but rather about kind of exploitation of women at home. And here are some studies that can provide us with clear impacts also of pandemics, because women are provided with more household work. And their professional activities are reduced because they just have no time. There is 24 hours in a day, and unfortunately no more. And also paid household work, as it should be some initiatives of the European Parliament to be further considered as implemented. Evidently, the local and regional governments is of the vital importance to reach change and to affect life of citizens. But to elaborate a bit more on that, why is it so important for the local and regional governments to reach sustainability, and how it can reach sustainability?
Because the local and regional level has the biggest chance to reach it. We are closest to the people. You can identify with the problems. You are interested in a solution because you're often affected by yourself. And it is particularly sustainable to involve the citizens in the solution and try to implement their suggestions. There are already many successful participation projects. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, and proximity can have many advantages if you use it properly.
It just sounds great. The local and regional governments should do it because it only can fulfill it in such a comprehensive and very targeted manner due to the proximity. What does good and human-centric governance mean for you? Are there some criteria that we can distinguish good governance from not so good?
Enabling participation, as I just mentioned, discussing on an equal footing, taking problems and suggestions you receive seriously, providing a clear framework. By this, I also mean providing security and be comprehensively. A good balance between economic and social policy is needed. It's often forgotten. And everything I have listened now is being lost more and more when I think of the pandemic, as you mentioned, and it shows the weaknesses very strongly. And of course, I am in the Council of Europe. We have 47 member states. So if I'm talking now, I cannot give a solution for 47 member states because you cannot lump them together. But the basic tendency in Europe is obvious. The dismantling of human rights, democracy, and respect of the rule of law. This is a real problem we see in all the countries, and those three ingredients are essential for a human-centric government. And if we think of that, then we have the chance to succeed, but we need them.
Absolutely. For many local and regional authorities, there is a question how to transform into more inclusive, into more sustainable landscape. So where to start? What should be the initial priorities for cities and regions probably not possessing enough resources or too much resources for doing that?
Well, first of all, it needs the understanding and the will to leave the three ingredients I just named. So don't forget them. They are always the roof, they are above. Then we have to start with the children and let the inclusive idea become normality. It starts in the kindergarten, it starts in the family, kindergarten, school, and it goes on. There needs to be a mixing of issues and a certain give you an example, a certain district or rural area should not be expected to bear everything. I think of housing, putting problem families together on one spot and keep the others away. You have to have a mixture, and politicians very often go out and have nice speeches about being democratic and liking everybody around them, but they very often preach water and drink wine. So therefore, it is very important not to forget to mix all those ingredients. And you asked me where to start. Well, at home, in the village, in the city, in the regional, in the local, in the European, and the world level. It has to grow again, and we can't get upset about narrow views and do nothing about it ourselves. I have to start by myself, you have to start by yourself, and my neighbor has to start by him or her. It is difficult in a time of xenophobia, I know that. I feel it by myself. I'm not outside of all those problems, but all the more necessary, bringing good examples before the curtain. This is important. Also role models there, and preventing the formation of ghettos. This is very important. Well, those should be the ingredients, but behind those lines, there's a lot of things to do.
Absolutely, but the key thing probably is like once an English poet wrote, the biggest mistake is to do nothing by knowing that we can do little. So even little contributions, small contributions matter in this context. And I will also feel how, for instance, young people, some small initiatives can impact and can turn these mindsets and start cooperation. And cooperation, as you've mentioned, is of the highest value and importance. And here you, as a member for many years of the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities with enormous contribution, the question is, what international partnerships mean for good governance? How can cities and regions grow and prosper through this cooperation?
Just a minute ago, I think I said you don't need to reinvent the wheel. And that's what I mean. We learn from each other, from international cooperation, from cooperation in our country. We only can learn from each other, and we should be open to learn from each other and become more aware through that of potential problems. There would be so many possibilities to cooperate across the borders, to share the big problems of individual countries among many, those to reduce the pressure and sufferings. Unfortunately, it is not yet possible in all areas. We see it now in the European Union, and I'm thinking of Europe and the refugee crisis and the lack of solidarity. So international cooperation in itself is very important, to learn from each other, to act very actively and fast. This is important because the others already can show you what they have done, and you can put it in your own project, in your own country, in your own politics, and take out the best ingredients you need for your problem.
How the COVID has impacted governance, and what are the best components of successful post-crisis strategy? As here we can also feel that this cooperation between countries, between governance, proved to be highly valuable during the COVID times. Without these partnerships, probably the effects would be much more negative.
Yeah, you're right. And the effects are manifold. And unfortunately, at the moment, almost exclusively not so positive. A loss of trust in politics is one problem, a split in society, impoverishment, isolation, a lack of prospects, increasing violence, especially against women, and regression in quality between men and women, and as I already named, the loss of democracy. So these are some of the major issues that need to be addressed now at the moment, but also in the future. And these are, on young people, are particularly hard hit. I just read in the newspaper yesterday in my country, depression among young people is currently a big topic, and I think also in the other countries. But 1 in 2 young people suffers from depressive moods. And in Austria, for example, high school students spend 60 days at school and 300 days at home. That does something to them. This is crazy. And that makes it all more important to finally take steps to open up for young people educational gaps, and unequal conditions now have an even harsher impact. You see it more, you feel it more, and we could have a discussion on every single topic I named. And what to do, and if there would be a post-crisis strategy. Well, in terms of successful post-crisis strategies, I cannot share practices from Austria yet, because we are in the middle of the pandemic, and there is, and at the moment, not a real post-crisis strategy. The government is trying to mitigate current major cuts in ad hoc actions, for example, by granting 50 to 80% revenue compensation to businesses that are not allowed to open for a certain amount of months, or labor law improvements for home office were decided to protect employees, more violence protection commissioners to be deployed. Those are actions taking right now, just a few examples. The only one I thought immediately of when you asked me is a thinking or planning of a vaccine production in the country is discussed to reduce dependence. So there is not, I cannot tell you any post-crisis strategy yet, because we have to do at the moment with the problems raising now, right now, and we try to smoothen them out a little. But major crises generate, but let me say so, what I see now, and there's a real problem, and major crises generate fears and irrational attitudes. Those we have every day. Therefore, the first lesson we should learn from this pandemic is that we can only overcome the crisis, as well as those to come, through reason and solidarity. And yeah, this is very easily said, but very hard done.
Definitely, in terms of mental health, the crisis is just enormous, has shown us enormous negativity, but also in terms of gender-based violence towards women. We have already seen the Council of Europe resolutions in this field, and the numbers are just shocking in terms of statistics. So let us hope that this situation will be somehow passed, and we will learn from it. And through such strategies as you've mentioned, and overall vision, it's just so empowering. And thank you for sharing this empowerment throughout our today's conversation. And the last but not the least, what is your message to our viewers on how to reach sustainable development goals, and what should we do on individual, local and regional as well as national level to come up together and to work for mutual sustainability, which is mutually valuable and evidently important?
Well, I read one a sentence in the SGD, I think it was 13 or 17, but nevertheless, this sentence fits to every single one of the 17 SDGs. No empowerment without rights, no rights without politics. And the 17 SDG targets are economically and socially and environmentally integrated and indivisible. And these three levels must mesh like a gear. And a challenge, this is a challenge for the 193 member states who signed the SDGs. Even this was a challenge before the pandemic. And the hurdles have not become smaller, on the contrary. And more commitment is needed from each individual. I start now again, but I cannot say it often enough. Everything starts at grassroots level. Start in the family and goes up to the worldwide environment. So let's, and one thing is very important for me, let's not close the borders. On the contrary, we need to coordinate, cooperate, and work together, as we discussed just a minute ago. Above all, it must not be that those who are silent are the majority. This is another thing. And raise your voice, be constructive, critical, but don't be quiet. We cannot change the past, but the future. But it needs a strong will, and not only from politicians, but from all of us. So that's my message. Just go on, say something and raise your voice, and don't be quiet.
Thank you so much for such highly inspiring, comprehensive message, and I do really hope that it will be heard. Thank you so much once again for sharing your experience and for everything you do in terms of supporting other women, in terms of sharing your experience, in terms of doing amazing initiatives in your country, as well as under the auspices of the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities of the Council of Europe. It's a deep, deep honor.
Thank you, Karina, and I wish you all the best, and I hope we see each other soon, and I'm sure your path is going high up. You are a good role model. Thanks a lot.